Beauties, today we're duping Chamonix Palette from Nomad. This is such a beautiful palette. If you want to see me swatch all these shades and tell you what shade I'm using, let's get started. As always, we have some extra shades. I'm going to go through every single shade, swatch it, and tell you what I'm using. And I'm going to introduce to you all some alternative shades that you could use if you don't like to go with what I thought is the closest dupe for each of these shades. Beauties, to dupe this palette, I tried to use as many of my Devinah shades as I could. So this is Raintarts from Devinah. For this duping, I used the swatches on Nomad's website, and this shade looked like it has a blue to a purple shift, and it kind of is duochromatic and iridescent. And I think Raintarts really fits those categories, and it even has a gold shift if you can see it at the very edge there. This is a gorgeous, gorgeous shade, and it has tiny sparkles throughout. Instead of going across the rows, I'm going to go up and down because the shades will be more similar. And for this second one, I have two options, both from Devinah. As I mentioned, it's going to be a lot of Devinahs. First one is Laze, and the second one is Nocturne Ash. I think both of these, if I remember correctly, are from Phantom Orbs. I have a video swatching everything in Phantom Orbs. If you want to check it out, I'll tag it for you. Laze, everybody, is insane. It's one of those very, very underrated, beautiful pink to gold shades. And if you want to go even more extreme than just pink to gold, you can do Nocturne Ash, and you can see the teal bluey shift with that one, and it has a more magenta-y undertone. Also, beauties, I have done 2 looks already in 2 of my To Buy or Not to Buys with this palette, and in the second look I used Laze, and this shade is just phenomenal. I'll tag those looks for you all if you want to check them out. Both of these shades are very creamy. For this next shade, I picked 2 options. The first one is from Devinah. This is Gallus. This is a beautiful duochrome that you're going to see the swatch of in a second. And the second one is something that's a little bit more perhaps similar to what's in the palette. Again, from the swatches, it looks like this is just a metallic. And the one I picked is I Love You from Sydney Grace, which is sort of a satin shade. It's really not that metallic. It's more just a normal shimmer or satin. Both beautiful, and you can't go wrong with either. But the reason I picked a deeper shade is because the palette to me did not have a deep magenta pink and didn't really have that many deep shades if I had made this not a deep shade. Also, Gallus seems a little too light to represent the shade in the Nomad palette, but of course you can use it if that's what you want. As I mentioned, Gallus is a beautiful duochrome, and it sometimes has a magenta shift too. I'm trying to see if I can capture the magenta shift also, but you should be able to see the gold to very deeper red shifts. And I Love You is undoubtedly a very, very special, deep plum shade. I realize I don't have any Devinah mattes to help me dupe the mattes in the palette, and that is why I chose the matte shades, or as many of them as I could, from the Best Mattes palette of Bella Beaute Bar. And this is a beautiful, very pigmented, mid-toned magenta pink shade. For the second shade down the second column, I picked October Odessey Light. This shade was from one of Sydney Grace's collabs with Tim Talia that I purchased as a single. This is a relatively common shade, so you probably have a shade similar to this. It's a mid-toned mauve shade that might even be considered a satin. For the last shade down this column, I picked another shade from the Best Mass palette of Bella Beaute Bar. And this shade looks very similar to my skin tone, so it's kind of blending. I don't know if you can see it. And in all honesty, it's good to have a shade very similar to your skin tone and palettes because it helps you blend things into your skin. For the first shade in our third row, I have two options. First one is Green Mist from Sydney Grace. And second option is Marama from Devinah. Marama is from Halo Moon collection that I don't think is any longer available. I know Deandra, the owner of Devinah, at some point mentioned that it involved some pigments that were discontinued or she couldn't get her hands on them. So the collection, frankly, whatever is available on the site is what it is, and I don't think Marama is available anymore. Now, I don't know if it's going to come back at some point, maybe in the future. If you have it, you can use it. If not, Green Mist is a fantastic alternative. Although these two shades are very different in texture, Green Mist is a very smooth and soft, it's one of those very light shimmers, and it's sort of a duochrome green to gold. It's gorgeous for the inner corner, and I've definitely used this shade on camera because it's one of my favorites from Sydney Grace. And then, Marama, what can I say? It looks like metal on your hand, although it's supposed to be iridescent, and it has all kinds of shades of the rainbow. I almost feel like whatever I say is going to be unfair because you can't get your hands on it anymore. So Deandra, if you're watching this, and I'm hoping you're watching this, please bring these back because this is such a beautiful shade. This next one is probably the oddball out because I didn't have anything from Devinah to put in this place, and I really wanted to use this one. You can probably see all the tiny glittery shimmeriness here. This is Ketchup from the Divinity collection of Shine by SD, which is a gorgeous, gorgeous, super shimmery shade. You all know that I have a very high regard for Shine by SD. The only thing I don't like about them is the price, which is a little bit higher end for my budget. But hey, even with the price, I still buy from them because their stuff is definitely unique. Like this one, I've never seen anything from any brand like this. This is extremely glittery, super, super shifty, and it literally looks like it's made up of glitter. Now, I don't think Shine by SD uses any unsafe glitters, but you might want to check that for yourself. I think at some point I checked and that was the case. You all know I would not buy things that are unsafe. It looks so sparkly and glittery that I'm now doubting myself. Maybe there's more than one oddball. This one is Beyond Apollo from Terramoons because for this spot I also didn't have anything from Devinah that I thought represented. So Devinah, if you're hearing this, I have a lot of these deep multichromes because I have almost all of your multichrome collections, but none of them has a green, like a forest green shift. Most of them have teal. So just letting you know, if you are thinking about, releasing something, maybe that's something you can consider. And while I was doing this duping, I also noticed that I don't really have that many shimmery forest greens either. So that was itself a challenge because this shade from the palette looks more like just a simple green shimmer, which doesn't seem like something I have. I might have them in palettes, but not singles. So I decided to pick this beautiful duo multichromy shade. I'm sure you can see the extreme purple shift, and then of course the deep beautiful green shift, and it definitely goes with all the other shades in the palette. For the first shade in our fourth column, I picked Thrilled from Sydney Grace because there was no deep green matte in the Best Mattes palette of Bella Beaute Bar. Now, even this shade is a little bit more teal than what I would have liked. But then, as I said, I don't have a lot of greens, ironically, because green is a color that looks really good on me. I would definitely need to make sure that I pick up at some point a deep forest green shade. Now, there might still be leftover tiny sparkles on my hand. This shade is obviously just a matte. Those are leftovers from past shades that I just couldn't get off. For our next shade, again, I picked a shade from the Best Mattes palette, and it's such a beautiful, very pigmented forest green. I think this shade looks a little bit more cool toned on camera, at least in the viewfinder, than it is. And this beautiful mint shade for our next dupe is also from the Best Mattes of Bella Beaute Bar. Great shade for inner corner for highlighting the brow bone, or even just to blend shades into your skin. Beautiful shade and super pigmented. For our first shade, in the 5th row, I picked Thetis from, I can't remember if it's Sea of Shadows or Mystic Cove collection of Devinah. I've done 2 looks in 2 of my to buy or not to buys with this palette, and I've already used this in one of them. It's a gorgeous shade. It kind of goes with my nail polish. My nail polish, everybody, is from Cleona. I'll put the name of what I'm wearing down below. Thetis is one of those insane, very shifty multichromes. You can see it has kind of a very light burgundy base, and then the shift over it goes all kinds of colors of the rainbow. Look over here. So we definitely have bronze, teal green, and then we have gold there, maybe even purple at some edges. Yeah, this is one of those crazy shades that if you wear, it's gonna steal the show. And it looked like it could be an alternative for what is in the palette. Again, from the swatches, honestly, this shade looks very underwhelming. And I imagine that the shade itself is probably more exciting than what you see in the swatch. For this next shade, which frankly from swatches looks like just a simple shimmer, blue shimmer, I picked Confetti Kisses, which has a purple shift. And then if you don't have that and you have a blue Lagoon from Looxi Beauty, you can use that one. Now, as you can see, Confetti Kisses, which is the top one, has a tad bit of a deeper base, and it has tiny purple sparkles throughout. And you also see a gold shift from some angles, like right there, and also a white silvery shift from some angles, like you can see a silver shift there. Beautiful shade overall. I don't know if I can call it a multichrome. It's not as multichromy as Thetis, for example. But then Looxi, girl, I don't know what's going on with this one because it is crazy. This one has a much more obvious purple shift that you can see there. And then you can see teal and blue and gold. And it also has the tiny sparkles all the way throughout. It is so unfortunate that Looxi kind of disappeared. Looxi, I really hope you're hearing this and you're watching this. Please come back and give us more shades like this. And to think that this shade was only $3, everybody. Wherever Looxi is, I want you back. Then for this last shimmer shade, which is the last shade down our 5th column, I of course had to pick something from Devinah, which ended up obviously again being a special shade because I don't have simple shades from Devinah, simple shimmers. But then if you absolutely had to do a simple shimmer, I figured Blue Jay from Looxi is a relatively decent dupe. Seance from Devinah has a beautiful blue glitter throughout, and that's kind of part of the reason I picked it, and I thought this kind of a shade would go with all the other pinks and blues in the palette. But frankly, if I had a bluer Devinah shimmer, I would have picked that one. And you can see that Blue Jay from Looxi is again gorgeous, gorgeous. Looxi, come back. Where are you? Also, beauties, Seance is from the Laveau collection. I have a whole review of Laveau on my channel. I'll link it for you all if you want to check that out. This is a beautiful and very interesting and different collection. This is Espresso Deep from Sydney Grace. I did not have a deep brown like this in the Best Mass palette or from Devinah to use, so I kind of had to go out and use Sydney Grace. I have no idea how I managed to get glitter into this shade, but this shade is a pure matte. I think there is still some glitter remnant from the past shades that I swatched on my hand, so please ignore that. This is a gorgeous matte brown. And for next to last, again, a periwinkle shade, which I think very closely resembles what's in the original palette. And this one is again from the Best Mass palette of Bella Beaute Bar. And our final shade is also a matte from the Bella Beaute Bar's Best Mattes palette. And I specifically wanted to challenge myself to use as many shades from this palette to inspire you all also to use the palettes you already own if you want to dupe some of these new palettes. Chances are you might have a lot of those shades in your existing palettes, so you might not need to go buy a new palette. Beauties, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget a thumbs up. Also, don't forget that I have a lot of palette dupes in my duping playlist that is going to be recommended to you on the screen about now. Also, beauties, if you want to see a couple of looks to create with this palette, you can check out the 2 to buy or not to buys where I made looks with this palette. They're both tagged below. You can keep watching if that's interesting to you. I love you all. Have an awesome day, an awesome week. And until next time, bye!